Well, good evening, good good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and good night, wherever you're at. This is the Cali Truck Stop Theater, and I am thankful that you are here watching. And I hadn't done a video now for I don't know a couple days or so, and that's just because I was just not in the area where I can upload videos. Now that I'm in the area where I can upload videos, I got the next video right here waiting for us. So remember the last time we was we're still into what I call the real Christmas story, and we're reading about the story of Jesus. And where we left off last was that Jesus was doing some teachings. He was teaching some people. A gathering, a group of gatherings. So he started getting his followers. He already picked out. He's got a bunch of disciples, and he already picked out some. He picked out his 12 that he chose to be apostles, including the one that was going to betray him, which was Judas Iscariot. He was an apostle, but we all know his ending with that. And then later on, they're going to be putting somebody else in Judas Iscariot's spot, replacing him with another apostle, and so on and so forth. So we're going to continue on where Jesus is talking to the people in parables. But what he's doing is he's talking to the people about himself, the kingdom of God, and God's um, who's God's inherited people are, and he's talking to them about who they are, but he's talking to them in um, in the parable, or he's talking to them in code, and only certain people immediately got it. Okay, and pretty much Jesus is saying that those who have the ears to hear, they should hear what Jesus is talking about. So we're going to get back into it. Jesus is here. He is talking to his apostles because they wanted to know a little bit more about. Well, they wanted to know why Jesus was talking in parables. Um, but Jesus goes on and he starts talking. He tells them, and he starts telling them more things in parables. And he tells them to think about that and understand what it means. So we are starting at Mark chapter 4, verses 21 through 25. This is Jesus tells the parable of the lamp, and um, this is in both. It is in Mark and in Luke. So we're going to read both. We're going to read that event in both books. Mark chapter 4, verse 21 to 25. Then Jesus asked them, "Would anyone light a lamp and put it under a basket or under a bed? Of course not. A lamp is placed on the lampstand where its light will shine, because everything that is hidden will eventually be brought into the open, and every secret will be brought to light. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand." Then he added, "Pay close attention to what you hear. The closer you listen, the more understanding will be given to you, and you will receive more. To those who listen to my teaching, more understanding will be given. But for those who are not listening, even what little understanding that they do have, it will be taken away from them." Luke chapter 8, verses 16 through 18. This is the same event, but different gospel. No one lights a lamp and then covers it with a bowl or hides it under a bed. A lamp is placed on a stand where its light can be seen by all who enter the house. For all that is secret will eventually be brought into the open, and eventually that that is concealed will be brought into the light and made known to all. So pay attention to how you hear. To those who listen to my teaching, more understanding will be given. But for those who are not listening, even what they think that they understand will be taken away from them. Now, okay. Ah, Jesus tells the parable of the growing seed. This is Mark chapter 4, verses 26 to 29. Jesus also said, "The kingdom of God is like a farmer who scatters seed on the ground. Night and day while he's asleep or awake, the seeds sprouts and grows. But he doesn't understand how this happens. The earth produces the crops of its own. First, a leaf blade pushes through, and then the heads of wheat are formed, and finally the grain ripens. And as soon as the grain is ready, the farmers come and harvest with the sickle, because the harvest time has come." Jesus tells the parable of the weeds. Matthew chapter 13, verses 24 to 30. Here is another story that Jesus told. "The kingdom of heaven is like a farmer who planted good seed in his field. But that night, as the workers slept, his enemy came and planted weeds among the wheat and then slipped away. And when the crop began to grow and produce grain, the weeds also grew. The farmer's workers went to him and said, 'Sir, the field where you planted that good seed is full of weeds. But where do they come from?' And the farmer exclaimed, 'An enemy has done this.' So the workers asked, 'Well, should we pull out the weeds?' And the farmer said, 'No, you'll uproot the wheat if you do that. Let the both of them grow until the harvest. And then then I will tell the harvesters to sort out the weeds, tie them into bundles, and then burn them, and to put the wheat in the barns.'" Jesus tells the parables of the mustard seed and the yeast. Now this event is told in 3 of the Gospels. And so we're going to start with Matthew chapter 13, verses 31 to 33. Jesus had another illustration that he used. He said, "The kingdom of heaven is like a mustard seed planted in the field. It is the smallest of all seeds, but it becomes the largest of garden plants, and it grows into a tree. Birds come and make their nests on its branches." Jesus also used this illustration. The kingdom of heaven is like the yeast that a woman has used to make bread. And even though she puts only a little bit of yeast in 3 measures of flour, it has permeated throughout every part of the dough. Mark chapter 4, verse 30 to 32. Jesus said, "How can I describe the kingdom of God? What stories should I use to illustrate it? And it is like a mustard seed planted in the ground. It is the smallest of all seeds, but it becomes the largest of all the garden plants, and it grows long branches, and birds can make nests in its shade." Luke chapter 13, verses 18 through 21. Jesus said, "What is the kingdom of God like? How can I illustrate this? It's like a tiny mustard seed that a man planted in the garden. And as it grows, it becomes a tree, and the birds make nests in its branches." And he also asked, "What else is the kingdom of God like?" Well, it is like the yeast that a woman has used in making bread. And even though that she puts only a little bit of yeast in 3 measures of flour, it has permeated through every part of the dough. Why Jesus taught in parables. This event is in 2 books. Matthew chapter 13, verses 34 to 35. Jesus used these stories and illustrations like these when speaking to the crowds, and in fact, he never spoke to them without using such parables. This fulfilled what God has spoken through the prophet. I will speak to you in parables, and I will explain I will explain things hidden since the creation of the world. Mark chapter 4, verse 33 to 34. Jesus used many similar stories and illustrations to teach the people as much as they could understand. In fact, in his public ministry, he never taught without using parables. But afterward, when he was alone with his disciples, he explained everything to them. This is Jesus explains the parable of the weeds. Matthew chapter 13, verses 36 to 43. When leaving the crowds outside, Jesus went into the house, and his disciples said, "Please explain to us the story of the weeds in the field." And so Jesus replied, "The Son of Man is the farmer who plants the good seed. The field is the world." So he's explaining these parables that he just told the people here. He's explaining what the symbolism is and how it's relating to what Jesus was trying to communicate. So, Son of Man replied that Jesus said, "The Son of Man is the farmer who plants the good seed. The field is the world, and the good seed represents the people of the kingdom. The weeds are the people who belong to the evil one, and the enemy who planted the weeds among the wheat is the devil. The harvest is the end of the world, and the harvesters are the angels. And just as the weeds are sorted out and burned in the fire, so it will be at the end of the world. The Son of Man will send his angels, and they will remove from his kingdom everything that causes sin and all who do evil. And the angels will throw them into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And then the righteous will shine like the sun in their Father's kingdom. Anyone with ears to hear should listen and understand." Alright, so he's basically laying it out there for his people. He's explaining to them how it's it's going to be when the world ends. He's explaining how all the bad and evil things and the bad and evil people will be separated from those who are God's children, and he's telling you where all the evil and corruptness is going, and where all of the pure and holiness is going. So he made it pretty clear there. Jesus tells the parable of the hidden treasure. This is chapter 13, verse 44. "The kingdom of heaven is like a treasure that a man has discovered hidden in a field. In all of his excitement, he hid it again, and then he sold everything that he owned to get enough money to buy the field." Jesus tells the parable of the pearl merchant. This is Matthew chapter 13, verses 45 to 46. "Again, the kingdom of heaven is like a merchant on the lookout for choice pearls. And when he discovered a pearl of great value, he sold everything that he owned and he bought it." Jesus tells the parable of the fishing net. Matthew chapter 13, verses 47 to 52. Again, the kingdom of heaven, this is Jesus talking, he says, "The kingdom of heaven is like a fishing net that was thrown into the water, and it caught fish of every kind. And when the net was full, the fisherman dragged it in up to the shore, sat down and sorted out the good fish into crates, but then he threw the bad ones away. That is the way that it will be at the end of the world. The angels will come and separate the wicked people from the righteous, throwing the wicked people into the fiery furnace, where there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. Do you understand these things? And they said, yes, we do. So, these parables that Jesus is talking about, do you understand them? He's basically talking about, like I was just saying earlier, he's talking about how he's going to separate the good from the evil. So then Jesus added, every teacher of religious law who becomes a disciple in the kingdom of heaven is like a homeowner who brings from his storeroom new gems of truth as well as old. Alright, so now we're going to be going into another event. Jesus calms the storm. So this is pretty popular. It's been talked about quite a bit. And this event is mentioned in 3 of the 4 Gospels. First one is Matthew chapter 8, verses 23 to 27. Jesus then got into a boat and he started across the lake with his disciples. Soon after they got in and started going out into the lake, a fierce storm struck the lake, with the waves breaking into the boat. Jesus was sleeping at this time. The disciples went and they woke him up, and they were shouting, "Lord, save us. We're about to drown." And Jesus responded, "Why are you afraid? If you have so little faith." And then he got up and he rebuked the wind and the waves, and suddenly there was great calm. The disciples were amazed by this, and they were saying, "Who is this man? Even the winds and the waves obey him." Mark chapter 4, 35 to 41. As evening came, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's cross to the other side of the lake." So they took Jesus in the boat and they started out, leaving the crowds behind, although other boats followed. But soon after, a fierce storm had came up. High waves were breaking into the boat, and it began to fill with water. Jesus was sleeping in the back of the boat at this time, with his head on a cushion. His disciples woke him up, and they were shouting, "Teacher, don't you care that we're going to drown?" And when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the waves, and by saying, "Silence, be still." Suddenly the wind stopped, and there was great calm. And then he asked them, "Why are you afraid? Do you still have no faith?" And the disciples were absolutely terrified. They were saying, "Who is this man? Even the wind and the waves obey him." Luke chapter 8, verses 22 to 25. One day, Jesus said to his disciples, "Let's go across to the other side of the lake." So they got into a boat, and they started out. And as they sailed across, Jesus settled down for a nap. But soon afterwards, a fierce storm came down on the lake, and the boat was filling with water, and they were in real danger. The disciples went to wake Jesus up, shouting, "Master, Master, we're going to drown." And when Jesus woke up, he rebuked the wind and the raging waves, and suddenly the storm stopped, and all was calm. His disciples Jesus asked them, "Where is your faith?" And the disciples were terrified, but yet they were amazed. They were saying things like, "Who is this man? When he gives a command, even the wind and the waves obey him." So, by listening to this event in these 3 books, you're starting to get a better picture of what was going on there. You know, Jesus was like, "Yeah, let's go to the other side of the lake, and we'll go hang out over there." Everything seemed to be fine, right? They get out in the water, things is cool. Jesus is like, "Hey, I'm about to go take a nap, yo. See y'all later," right? It wasn't anything. I'm just animating it, but anyways, the disciples they got nervous once they got into some trouble. And that's how we That's how we get sometimes. A little bit of trouble comes, and it looks like all is about to go downhill. And so they calling out for Jesus. They're like, hey, Jesus, you know, don't you care that we're going to drown? We're about to drown. We got the water coming up in the boat. The boat's about to sink. You know, and Jesus is like that. I don't know. The way that it's written, it sounds to me that Jesus was kind of a little bit irritated because he got woken up out of his nap. You know, I mean, come on. How do you feel when somebody wakes you up out of your nap for something that may seem pretty trivial to you? You know. So, but Jesus got up and he calmed the wind and the waves, right? And so everything went back to normal. But and this is where I'm thinking that Jesus was kind of annoyed from getting woken up because he's like, "Where's your faith at? I mean, don't you guys have any faith that that we're gonna make it through? I mean, really, when you think of when you look back, let's say when you look back on something, you're like, it actually wasn't all that bad. But while you're going through it, you're like, you're like panicking and stuff, right? Because because you're like, you're not thinking about your faith and you're not thinking about, you know, you're not thinking about like, well, I'm going through this, but I know that I'm gonna come out okay at the end, right? But here's something that's kind of throwing me off here. Is like the disciples, they're like, who is this guy? To where he says something to the wind and the waves and they stop. They're acting like, who is this guy? But yet, however many minutes ahead of time, they was calling out to Jesus, expecting him to get them out of the situation. They're expecting him to do something. They knew that he was going to do something to get them out of here, right? So I'm kind of puzzled. It's like, why is it you guys acting brand new? When you guys are just howling at Jesus, telling him to come save you. And then once he does that, then you're like, what is he doing? Who is this guy? It's just weird to me how how that comes out. All right. So yep, the next event here, Jesus sends demons into a herd of pigs. This is it's in three of the four Gospels. This was Matthew chapter 8, verse 28 to 34. When Jesus arrived on the other side of the lake in the region of the Gadarenes, two men who were possessed by demons met him, and they lived in the cemetery and they were so violent that no one could go through that area. They began screaming at Jesus, saying, "Why are you interfering with us, Son of God? Have you come here to torture us before God's appointed time?" And there happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding in the distance. So the demons begged, saying, "If you cast us out, send us into that herd of pigs over there." And Jesus commanded them. He said, "All right, go." And so the demons came out of the men and entered the pigs, and the whole herd plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town, telling everyone what had happened to the demon-possessed men. Then the entire town came out to meet Jesus, but they begged Jesus to go away and leave them alone. They weren't too appreciative of the presence of Jesus there. All right, Mark chapter 5, verse 1 through 20. So they arrived at the other side of the lake in the region of the Gerasenes. And when Jesus climbed out of the boat, a man possessed by an evil spirit came out from a cemetery to meet him. And this man lived among the burial caves and could no longer be restrained, even with a chain. Whenever he was put in the chains and shackles, as he often was, he just snapped the chains from his wrist, and he smashed the shackles. Day and night this man wandered around the burial caves and in the hills, howling and cutting himself with sharp stones. And when Jesus was still some distance away, this man saw Jesus and ran to meet him. And then he bowed before Jesus. And with a shriek, the man cried, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? In the name of God, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already said to the spirit, "Come out of the man, you evil spirit." And Jesus then demanded, "What is your name?" And the spirit replied, "My name is Legion, because there are many of us inside this man." Then the evil spirits begged him again and again not to send them to some distant place. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby. And the spirit said, "Send us into those pigs. Let us enter them." And so Jesus gave them permission, and the evil spirits came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd of about 2,000 pigs plunged down the deep hillside into the lake and drowned in the water. The herdsmen fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened, and a crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who was possessed by the legion of demons. And he was sitting there fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. Then those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man and the pigs. And the crowd began pleading with Jesus to go away and leave them alone. And as Jesus was getting into the boat, the man who had been demon-possessed begged to go with him, but Jesus said, "No. Go home to your family and tell them everything that the Lord has done for you and how merciful that he's been." So the man started off to visit the 10 towns of that region and began to proclaim the good things that Jesus had done for him, and everyone was amazed at what this man had told them. Luke chapter 8, verse 26 to 39. So they arrived in the region of the Gerasenes and across the lake from Galilee. And as Jesus was climbing out of the boat, a man who was possessed by demons came out to meet him. For a long time, this man had been homeless and naked, living in the cemetery outside of town. And as soon as he saw Jesus, he shrieked and fell to the ground in front of him. And he screamed, "Why are you interfering with me, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? Please, I beg you, don't torture me." For Jesus had already commanded the evil spirit to come out of him. This spirit had often taken control of this man. Even when he was placed under guard and put in chains and shackles, he simply broke them and he rushed out into the wilderness, completely under the demon's power. Jesus demanded, "What is your name?" "Legion," he replied, because he was filled with many demons. And the demons kept begging Jesus to not send them into the bottomless pit. There happened to be a large herd of pigs feeding on the hillside nearby, and the demons begged him to let them enter into the pigs. So Jesus gave them permission, and the demons came out of the man and entered the pigs, and the entire herd plunged down the steep hillside into the lake and drowned. And when the herdsmen saw this, they fled to the nearby town and the surrounding countryside, spreading the news as they ran. People rushed out to see what had happened. A crowd soon gathered around Jesus, and they saw the man who had been freed from the demons. He was sitting at Jesus' feet, fully clothed and perfectly sane, and they were all afraid. And then those who had seen what had happened told the others about the demon-possessed man that had been healed. And all the people in the region of the Gerasenes begged Jesus to go away and leave them alone, because a great wave of fear had swept over them. So Jesus returned to the boat and left, crossing back to the other side of the lake. The man who had been freed from the demons begged to go with him, but Jesus sent him home, saying, "No, go back to your family and tell them everything that God has done for you." So the man had went through all of the other towns, proclaiming the great things that Jesus had done for him. So, listening to that, I'm like, man, you got, well, one of the books mentioned that there was two men, and then the other ones only mentioned that there was one man who was demon possessed. Now, I don't quite understand that, except for maybe, um, that you got three people talking, talking about the same incident, but they're all looking at it from different points of view. So I don't know for sure if it was actually two people there or just one person, but that's really not the important part of it. But the important part of that particular incident is that this demon possessed man was um, somebody who was possessed by many many demons, and you oftentimes wonder how can one person have all of these demons. Well, um, the way that I think we already covered this portion of it earlier on in the story, but the only way that I can understand how one person can have multiple demons, especially something like over 1,000 demons, is a legion is I think it's I think a legion is I think either 1,000 or 2,000. It's a count of 1,000 or 2,000. But just to make it easy, a legion is a count over 1,000, at least over 1,000. Okay, so this man had at least 1,000 to 2,000, maybe even more of these demons. So, only thing that I can think of uh, to understand how one person has all these demons is because of what Jesus had spoken to some of these people that he's healed, and he actually explained explained this, and so he says that he used a parable, saying he mentioned about how a demon gets cast out, it goes out in the desert in the dry places, and the spirit can't find that demon spirit is not able to find any rest, and so that spirit says to itself, "I'm going to go back to where I came from because I know I'm going to find rest there." And so when that demon spirit goes back to where he came from, or back to that person that he had once possessed, he comes back to find that the place has been cleaned up, swept out, and put in order. Jesus mentioned that, or he explained in the story. He says that once that demon comes back and he finds that this place is all put back in order, he then goes and gets 7 more demons, more wicked than he was, to come along with him to go and dwell back into that home, which is pretty much that person. So, for somebody to have that many demons in him, I'm thinking that this is how he was able to get that many demons. It's basically multiplying. It sounds to me like he's had deliverance over and over and over again, and each time the demons came back, they came back with the multitude of more demons, and filled them up. So let's say you got one gets cast out, he comes back with 7 others, and so now he comes back in. Now instead of having one demon, you got 8 demons. You know, you get the deliverance, get those 8 demons cast out, and now those 8 demons come back, and each one of those 8 demons have now got they now have 7 more demons. So you see how that gets multiplied and multiplied exceedingly great. So that's my take on it. I don't know if that's really how it has gone down, but you got the idea. If you ever ask yourself that question, how is it that somebody has that many demons? That's how it is. Also, you look at some of the characteristics of demons is that they give people, in many cases, a demon will give a person, superhuman strength. So, the Bible mentions that this dude, he was just breaking shackles and chains like he's tearing pieces of paper up, pretty much. So you see that this guy has got a lot of strength, you know. Um, and another thing that I was getting off of here is that the demons were mentioning about they were begging Jesus um, not to cast them into the bottomless pit, the pits of hell, pretty much. That's originally where these demons came from, because um, I don't know, I don't remember exactly where it's written in the Bible, but the the demons who had rebelled against God in heaven, they were all thrown into the bottomless pit. And so these demons, the ones that have been released from the bottomless pit, I would assume they have been conjured up, by the various people that were, calling them up. Like you got your soothsayers and you got your people that consult the dead and all that kind of stuff. And so I'm assuming that those demons are escaping out of the bottomless pit because they're being conjured up by by these types of people who are into witchcraft and idolatry and all that kind of stuff. And now that these demons are out, they're out roaming the earth now, and they're begging to not be put back into the pits of hell, and Jesus is allowing this. Okay, and this is what I'm thinking is happening today. I'm thinking that there are more demons that are out roaming around this earth now that have been pulled out of that pit. This is just my thought about it. They've been pulled out of the pit, and I think that the main way that they come out is because they've been conjured up through. I'm sure you've heard of portals and things of that nature. So portals are opened up, and they're being conjured up, and they're being released out on the earth, which is a prophecy that that these demons are coming out of the bottomless pit. And I'm assuming that later on later on in the future, I'm assuming that an even greater multitude is going to be coming out of the bottomless pit. But I think that we're seeing a big um, I think we're seeing an influx in that now, um, with the way that our world is running today. Anyway, that's just a little side note about what I think. But I'm gonna stop right there, and then we'll go ahead and get into the next portion of the real Christmas story, which is the life of Jesus through the 4 Gospels. So I do thank you for sticking around and listening to story time, pretty much. And I hope that you are getting entertained. Well, it's not the main thing is that I'm not trying to just entertain you. I do want to make sure that I am doing what what I'm supposed to do, is that I'm getting the word out. I'm I'm getting the word out about Jesus. Okay, and so I hope that it's entertaining for you. But I'm just I'm help spreading the word so people know about Jesus and understand who He is, and hopefully hopefully the word will get people saved. You know, will get people saved and rededicated to the Lord. And even the things that I read, it's even for me too. It's not that it's not that I've achieved, achieve superior closeness to Christ or anything like that. And I'm just telling you that you guys are heathens. No, 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 no. This is for everybody. But I'm just doing my part in spreading the word. And if you listen, the Holy Spirit will conduct or will tell you how to do the same thing. It might not be doing what I'm doing, just reading out of the book. It could be just the way that you live. It could be that you get some piece of wisdom that is meant for somebody, and that's spreading the word too. So yeah, I'll try to get another video up tomorrow, if I have internet connection. But I want to say, stay safe out there. I pray for your health and your safety, and God bless you.